Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. This is Julie Bruns, and you are about to be inspired. I am so excited to share my conversations with amazing people from all walks of life who figured out how to be happy, peaceful, and content doing work they love and making the world a better place so that you can see what's possible for your life. I can't wait to hear what you think. Send me an email and let me know one thing you're taking away from this episode. And never forget, anything really is possible. Welcome to this episode, everyone, of the Peace and Possibilities podcast. My guest this week is Drew Dudley. And Drew, I'm sure you remember, but we didn't meet when I saw you and first came across you. You were at College of DuPage speaking, or was it Glenbard, the Glenbard Parents Series? When did I see you speaking? You were speaking, sure. College of DuPage. You were speaking on stage somewhere.
Yeah.
For sure. And this was probably in the early, I would guess, 2000s. I mean, I used to go to workshops whenever I could at night. Whenever I saw something that was inspiring, I would go to these workshops, whoever was presenting them, whether it was a college or a high school series, and I would show up with by myself or with my sisters or a friend that I would drag with me, and you were speaking. And I remember because you had your fedora on, I think you were on stage with your fedora.
Yes,
and I just remember loving what you were saying and loving your energy and your positivity. And I don't remember how I came across your name again in the last 6 or so months or whatever it was when I reached out to you again. I don't remember how I came across you again, but I saw your name somewhere and I was like, I'm going to get him on my podcast. So here we are today. Thanks for joining.
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled to have the chance to do it. I love reconnecting with people because let's face it, it's kind of cool when someone tells you years later that they remember the opportunity to hear you. It's still such a cool little vibe.
I totally agree. Yes. You never know what you're going to say that's going to stick with someone, or just the energy in general. I don't remember specifically what you said. I just remember how I was feeling. And that's the quote, right? People always remember how you made them feel. So obviously you had an impact. So kudos to you.
I think if it's the event that I believe it was, I'm lucky I survived it. I was in a car accident on the way back from that. Yeah, my Uber driver drove into a tree to avoid driving into a donut shop because he was run off the road.
Oh my God.
And you want to talk about moments of self-sacrifice. And it was pretty clear that we had a choice, like go through the front window of a donut shop or hit a tree. And he steered right into a tree.
Wow.
So I think that might be the closest I've come to actually being physically harmed while doing my
scary.
job. I'm kind of a fluffy job when it comes to physical threats.
Yeah, I'll say. Okay, so tell everyone what you do now, and what you've been doing, and how you got into speaking, and just the industry that you're in now. And did you always see yourself with this career where you're like, I want to do this someday, or did it just not happen exactly that way?
Well, I'm a speaker and an author, and I speak specifically about leadership behaviors and how we can close the gap between the people that we want to be and how we're actually behaving. Because I think the gap exists for all of us, but I think most of us don't deny it. What we do is we rationalize it as being temporary. So yeah, there's a gap between how I'm behaving and who I want to be, but just until the pandemic's over, or I get promoted, or the wedding. And so I talk about a process that's rooted in behavioral psychology that tries to help people identify the daily behaviors they want to make non-negotiable and then actually do so. And our argument is that leadership actually exists in these powerful moments of interpersonal impact. And what I try to do is teach people how to make those moments of impact unconscious. Because I think the most high profile thing I ever did was a TED Talk on something I call the lollipop moment, which was someone letting me know that something I'd done years ago had a really profound impact on her, and I didn't remember it. But the thing that I did was an accident. I wasn't planning on doing it. I try to talk about a process that we developed at the University of Toronto, where I ran their leadership program for about a decade. How do we actually make those behaviors conscious? Because if leadership exists in individual moments of impact, that means it's accessible to everyone on the planet. But when we're taught that leadership is about power and influence and titles, it makes a lot of people feel like it's not part of their identity. And that means we close off this idea of leadership to huge portions of the world. And if we can reframe leadership as being about individual moments of impact, powerful moments, we start to open up access to a power that everyone can use. And most sources of power on earth have systemic barriers between that power and most of the people. So I talk about, let's reframe leadership. And then here's the how portion. If leadership exists in continuous disciplined execution of certain non-negotiable behaviors, let's talk about how to do those. And in those behaviors, we have a positive impact. So I ran the leadership program at U of T for 8 years, I think it was, moved on to speaking because when we developed the process, it was so effective that other schools and then corporations asked me to do it. And the big question is, no, I had no concept that I was going to do this. If you'd asked my mom whether I'm going to get paid to talk, she probably would have argued that I was going to get paid to shut up. So the idea that I can do something, I can tell stories that connect with people's experience and get paid for it, I never would have imagined something that cool is possible. I was supposed to be a lawyer. You go to high school, you get good marks. If you like science, you go to med school. If you don't like science, you go to law school. That's just how it was. And I didn't expect this. I got involved with a charity. I started doing sessions to help develop their volunteers. Somebody was sitting in the back who was the dean of students at U of T. And he came up and he said, this is the practical type of leadership we want to teach. And it all evolved from there. But I did my TED talk, walked off the stage. Someone grabbed me and said, you want to do this for a living? And I laughed and said, sure. Yeah, I bet you that's possible. And that was 1,000 speeches on 5 continents ago.
So crazy.
Yeah,
So
not planned.
a couple of things you said about like, I never thought it was possible, which is why that's part of the title of my book, Possibilities, and this podcast, because you never know what's possible. Number one. Number two, you never know who's sitting in the back of the room, whether you're in a school, an office, an airport, you just don't know who you're around. You have no idea who you're making an impact on and what their story is. And then the third thing, which I think is the most important thing you said, and I completely agree with, is you can be a leader from any seat. There's this really great book. Benjamin Zander is a speaker and a writer. His wife wrote a book too. And it's kind of what sparked this idea of possibilities for my book, because I read a couple of their books and it's all about like what's possible. If you can imagine it, it's possible. If you can, think of it, see it, etc. Even if you can't see it, doesn't mean, of course it's still possible. But he talks in his book particularly about leading from any seat. And that doesn't matter if you're in high school, doesn't matter if you're a CEO, but you're right. If people assume, I know I did growing up, I'm not going to really be leading until I'm in a management position with people reporting to me. And that's really not the case. You can be leading as a 12-year-old, you can be leading as a 22-year-old, right? You can be leading as a 6-year-old who's never been in management before. It's about your actions and your behaviors and all of those other things. So I love what you're talking about. I love that you, that there's schools that say, yes, this is important stuff and we should be teaching it to kids, because it's really just like climb up the ladder. It used to be climb up the ladder. And then when you get there, then you can have some influence and then you can lead people. It's like, no, all along the way you are.
Leaders don't exist. Well, it's an interesting little argument I've been kicking around in my head that leaders don't exist. Leadership acts exist. So when you're behaving, when you're engaging in leadership acts, which is moments that empower people, moments that have a positive impact, in the moment that you're engaging in the act, you're a leader. When you're not, you're not. So leaders only exist during the demonstration of leadership, which means instead of saying, well, Julie is a leader, the goal is to think Julie is usually a leader or often a leader. There's no shame when you're not engaging in leadership acts, but if we start to identify leadership in the act itself rather than the person giving it, because it's in the act and it's like you said, how you make people feel. I was dating a woman who's become a really good friend of mine. And, after, I don't know, months, I found some notes that she took and I looked and I said, this is my stuff. And she said, oh no, that's from a speaker I saw ages ago. I don't remember his name, but I remember like I took those messages with me. I'm like, this was me. And that's only when we realized. Now there had been 100-pound weight loss in between as well. So I can understand that, but she didn't remember my name. She remembered the messages and the stories. And because the story is the basic human understanding, that's why I think it's so great you do podcasts like this. And anyone who's listening, I want you to know this. Stories can impact people in ways you don't understand. Mm-hmm. And it is the basic unit of human understanding. So please share your story. I think people think it's boring or it's not as impressive as other people's, but you have no idea how that one message is going to get out there. I know people who said that their lives the possibility of recovering from cancer never occurred to them. until they met someone who shared the story.
Yes.
I'm dealing with taking care of an elderly parent right now, which they don't prepare you for.
No.
We don't really think of that.
No.
And it's been other people saying, here's something you should know, be on the lookout for this. This is normal. If you're listening to this, one of the biggest ways to open possibilities for yourself, but really for other people, is please share your story. You don't know how it would be processed by other people, because it's in the act, it's in the story that leadership exists, not necessarily in you or your name or your title.
I totally agree. You're right. You never know. So share your story. Completely agree. And you never know. Like, I could tell you one story, and there'll be 4 people in the audience. You know, there's hundreds or thousands of people in the audience, and every single person in the audience is going to take away something different, because it's going to touch them a different way, because they're a different human being. They have different experiences. They grew up a different way, whatever it was, but everyone's going to remember something different about it, which is why, like you said, don't even think about whether it's boring or not. It's like, you might tell it and only one person gets a takeaway from it. Probably not likely. Probably everyone would get something from it, but you just don't know. And you don't know what other people are experiencing ever in their everyday lives. And you can have the benefit of other people's experiences and perspective. Like you said, taking care of an elderly parent. If no one knew you were going through it, and you didn't share the story with anyone, you would have all these other little tools or perspectives that will be more helpful to you, and obviously make the journey a little bit more tolerable, or whatever, pleasant, whatever it is, while you're going through it. So I totally agree, that's the whole reason I'm doing this podcast. If you hear a story about someone you can relate to, that's why I do all different walks of life, young, old, doesn't matter, because everyone can see themselves in someone that I'm talking to.
I think what's really interesting, folks, and for what it's worth, the stories that impact other people the most is the one we're most hesitant to share. So for what it's worth, it's the stuff that hurt you, and then I think we get embarrassed about because we think it indicates we're a failure or stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Those stories are the ones that really hit people the most. I think growing up, we're taught that if you want to be successful, you got to make people look at you and think, oh, wow, I can't do that. And I think one thing I found is that maybe the biggest gift we can give other people is not to make them look at us and say, and be so impressed and say, oh, I can't do that. It's to give people the chance to look at you and say, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one scared of that, hurt by that, hiding that. So it's the pieces of us that I think are least hesitant to share because we think they make us look bad, that actually are the stories that resonate the most. It's why, in my book and in my speeches, I talk about being bipolar. I talk about my battles with alcoholism. I talk about, my battles with my weight, and that's stuff that I was embarrassed about for a long time. But it's the stuff, like I talk, 1,000 speeches all over the world. I'm incredibly lucky, but I talk about being bipolar for 60 seconds out of a 60-minute speech. And more people email me about that or come up and talk to me about that than anything else that I say.
Yes.
And I hid it for ages because we still equate mental illness with mental weakness all too much. But share the stories that you think are the things you should hide, because those are the things that people most need to hear.
Totally. Because that's what they're probably hiding. And then they're like, okay, I'm not alone. And that you feel less alone. So true. Okay. What advice, because I'm sure you probably get, because you're speaking so often and traveling and everything, you probably get a lot of questions of people saying, hey, what you said makes sense, but for me, it's not going to, whatever. People always say it's not going to work for me, or I'm different because. What do you tell those people that are searching for meaningful work or trying to, I don't know, get through an obstacle and don't think that, it's going to apply to them? What advice do you give to people that are searching for meaningful work or careers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of answers to that. I think the big one is when people say this isn't me or I'm different. My thing is always, okay, we'll try. Try one little piece of it.
Yeah.
My favorite writer in the world said, I love to write. It's how I enter the world, but I hate to start. Because there's nothing more terrifying in this world than a blank piece of paper. And as a guy who tries to create speeches, I feel the same way. Yeah. So for the first part, what do I say to people who say this doesn't work for me? I say, try. Like, give it 2 weeks and then toss it if you want. For people looking for meaning, I think one of the key things is recognize when you're facing an obstacle. I guess one of the things I say to people when they say, I can't get through this, or this is insurmountable, is I like to ask my friends, okay, tell me about the last time that you failed to get through an obstacle that you were facing, that you just didn't survive. Because nobody has the tale of the story where they didn't survive, right? Because they're here in front of us. Right. And so I think one of the things we do is that we look at our mistakes as lessons on how not to make mistakes again. And I think that's great, obviously. But I think we also have to recognize that our lessons should be a source of strength, because the thing that often brings you closest to breaking is the thing that keeps you from breaking in the long run. You have survived every challenge you've ever faced, which is not to say you're not upset about some parts of it, that you didn't lose parts of yourself or you don't carry scars with you. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But you have gotten through every challenge you've ever faced, which means there's zero statistical evidence that you won't get through this next one.
You're right.
You walk out the door a million times and nobody hits you in the face with a pie. It's really silly to think that it's highly probable someone will hit you in the face with a pie next.
Right.
But we treat failure like that. So that's the message I give people, is draw on the difficulties, not to dwell on them, but to recognize that they are an indication of what you can possibly do down the road. I don't have New Year's Eve on December 31st because it's arbitrary. My New Year's is January 17th because it's the anniversary of the most awful day of my life. But I don't dwell in it. What I do is anytime I face something difficult, career-wise, personally, health-wise, is I think of that day and I go, oh, please. Like if I can get through that, this is nothing.
Nothing.
So draw on I guess the best way to put it is this, to quote that writer I was talking about earlier, never forget the battles that you fought and won. They can be a source of strength down the road. So when you're facing an obstacle, take a step back, think of your worst day and realize how much strength you actually do have. Prove it. There's no empirical evidence you won't be able to.
You're right. I've talked to a lot of people, obviously. I've never heard anyone explain it that way before. It's so true. There is zero evidence that you didn't survive anything that you went through. So I wrote that down because it's such an important point. It's like, tell me about a time when you didn't survive. Well, you're here talking about it. So obviously you might not love the way you feel right now, but you did survive it, which means you're stronger than you thought you were, et cetera. And you have more power and all of that stuff.
That's the power of questions, asking people stuff. The best type of questions for leaders to ask are the ones where what you do is cause the other person to realize they don't know answers, and then they start asking themselves more questions. So that's the power of saying, when was the last time you didn't get through one, for instance?
Yeah, I love it. I love questions, which is why I have one of the chapters in my book is about curiosity, because if all else fails, like just remaining curious, whether it's about yourself or someone else, it really can take you out of kind of like being stuck in your mind, sometimes for a lot of the time, actually. Okay, so let's talk about lessons in your life and career. It sounds like you have had a lot of life lessons, and I'm sure you've had career lessons. Like, what's something you wish you had learned a little bit sooner? Like, what's one of those things where you're like, I finally got it, and damn it, I wish I would have known this at 15, 25, whatever it is.
That it's better to be decisive than certain in life and business. Because
better to be decisive than certain.
Yeah, because being decisive is possible. Being certain very rarely is.
Ooh.
And if I could go back to the beginning of, when you're an adult, which is when you stop drinking on Tuesdays. And so I think that I would sit me down and say, look, the number one skill you got to develop is a comfort with uncertainty. And what the last 2.5 years have shown us is just that, right? Is that if you need to know for certain before you take action on anything in your life, you're never going to do anything.
You're never gonna.
Yeah. So a lot of my life lessons came because I was being decisive instead of certain, because I didn't believe certainty was ever going to come down the pipe. But I would say to myself, you just got to become more comfortable and skilled. I mean, you got to practice it at living with uncertainty, at knowing that life is still going, and recognizing that momentum is far more important than plans, and that 5-year plans tend to go boom, but 5-year momentum will always keep you going forward. So focus more on decisions that build momentum than making sure that everything goes according to a plan. Because, what's the old, some things are cliche because they're, if you want.
What's the one? I'm like, tell God you have plans and he'll laugh or something like that.
Watch what happens. So, I think a comfort with uncertainty is a really powerful thing. And that to me is, don't be afraid of being decisive, because I think we put so much effort into becoming the type of people who don't make mistakes, where a far more beneficial focus of our energies is becoming the type of person who has great faith in our ability to recover from mistakes. Because if you become confident that you can come back from mistakes, you become a lot less afraid of making them. I talk about a little bit in my book, something called rejection therapy. If anyone's listening, go check out a TED Talk by Jia Zhang called 100 Days of Rejection, where he intentionally tried to get rejected at least once a day, I call it rejection therapy. I learned it, from another guy, but John does a great book on it, where you actually practice every day. What did I try today that might not work, but I tried it anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you suck at something and you don't want to suck anymore, practice. And it's such a weird, simple little life.
Mm-hmm.
If you suck and you don't want to suck, practice. Rejection is something very difficult for most of us because we take rejection not as an indication that the person can't deliver what we're asking for, but as an indication we don't deserve what we ask for.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so essential to practice getting let down by yourself and other people, not because it ever feels good, but because it becomes less intimidating, if that makes any sense.
I
So
love
practice that.
I love what you said about, being decisive versus being uncertain and everything else you just said, but really like you said, you can never be 100% certain, but if you just decide and then you make a mistake, like you said, you're proving to yourself that you can, number one, survive it. And then you're building your confidence and your faith that, all right, well, maybe that didn't work, but I'm still here. I learned this. Usually you're learning something. And now I'm better equipped to do the next thing. Then whatever next decision I'm going to make, I'm a little bit smarter, wiser, stronger, whatever it is, because that didn't go as I planned. We've talked to our boys about this for years. You're never going to know. And you're smart, you're hardworking, you're resourceful, you're all of these other things. And if you don't have the answers, there's other people in your lives that do. There's the internet, obviously, there's human beings that that you grow up. I mean, there's always someone else you can ask a question to and get help from. It doesn't have to all be on your shoulders. And it's an easier way to go about life. And it's also.
And confirm anything you read on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, not all the answers.
My girlfriend say trust, but verify. But verify. That's constantly what I get fed. Trust, but verify.
The whole point is there's a million resources at your fingertips, literally on the computer. And then all these human beings that are also on the computer that you could have a phone call with or email or whatever. Like there's always answers. We're living in a time where there's no excuse not to know something or ask a question or whatever it is. But the bottom line is if you can just get comfortable with, hey, you're going to make a decision and it might not end up perfectly, but this is what happened. And now you learn something and you grew from it. You always are growing from it because you survived. Okay. So I have two final questions for you. And you can answer them in whichever order you'd like. What's the greatest gift you, Drew, offer the world every day? And what's something you're taking away from our conversation today?
Biggest gift I give to the world every day.
You gift. So no one likes answering this question, but I like it. Like what would you say is your greatest gift that you give everyone every day, the world?
Well, I think it might not be every day because obviously I don't get the chance to talk to everyone every day, but I have a series of 6 questions I ask myself every day, each one tied to a value. And I try to get 3 out of 6 every day. And so I hope the gift that I give is tied to those questions. So what did I do today to recognize someone else's leadership? What did I do today to make it more likely someone would learn something? What did I try that might not work, but I tried anyway? What did I do today to move someone else closer to a goal? When did I elevate instead of escalate today? So elevating is trying to succeed, escalating is trying to win. And what did I do today to be good to myself? And I hope the gift that I give is in the process of answering those questions, I impact somebody in a positive way. It's hard to answer the question, how do I recognize someone else's leadership without making someone's day better? Yeah. The gift I try to give is to continue to share that message that I think improves lives, even on the days where talking about it makes me feel like a failure. Because I go up and I talk about a leadership process that I really makes impact happen every day. The problem when you speak, especially when you tell stories and people say, oh, they feel motivated when you speak, is there's this impression that you always embody absolutely everything you talk about. Yeah. And there are days I get up there and as I'm saying it, I'm like, you have not done this week. And it's the gift I try to give is to continue to share the idea, even when I feel bad about myself when I failed to do so. But the whole idea of my message is, every day is a restart. Sorry, it's not a restart, it's a recommitment. Every day is day one, a recommitment. It's not a restart. Yeah, every single day is a recommitment. It came from, I'm a recovering alcoholic. So the message from when you're in recovery is all that matters is the choice today. Between getting up in the morning and going to sleep, my primary number one above every other goal, don't have a drink today. That is a daily individual decision. Now, the reason that we focus only on number one, as if we treat every day of our recovery like it's our first day, is that you don't rest on your laurels from what you've accomplished thus far, and you don't get overwhelmed by how much there is still to do. All that matters is your non-negotiable behavior today. For me, don't have a drink, but also have impact, have growth, have empowerment, have courage through these questions. And my gift is to try to keep believing in that message, even on the days I'm failing myself. And that makes me feel like I'm failing everyone who likes my book and my speeches.
Yeah.
And that's tough sometimes. For me, the hardest part of my job is recognizing that all jobs have a crappy part. And the one I got to work through in mine, because it's a gift, is that there are days where you just feel like a fraud. Because yesterday I yelled at somebody, and now I'm up on stage talking about the power of those individual moments. But I think what gets you in trouble is when you don't bother thinking about it. People who don't ever feel bad about themselves and their behavior are sociopaths. So always bear that in mind. What did I take from this conversation? Again, that I'm not alone, right? And it's been, you're the first podcast I've done in over a month. And I've only done one speech in the last 6 weeks. I took a little downtime. I'm moving my mom across the country. And what I took away from this is a reminder of how much I love talking about this. Because this is my first real sort of business thing that I've done in several weeks. And it's a reminder of how incredibly lucky I am, because there are other people out there who love talking about this, and we have a community that does it. And it's hard in the pandemic because I don't get to see whether or not my message impacts people because I'm looking into a lens here. And so to be reminded that there's a community out there, that's what I take away from here. And everyone listening too, is that it's been so easy to feel cut off over the last couple of years. And sometimes we do it to ourselves, even when there's not a pandemic we're fighting against. Community is powerful. And getting to talk to people like you is a reminder that even though we've, especially in our business, people who love to get up on stages, it's been a little rough, that we're not on our own. And that sometimes when you look around the world and you watch how people are treating one another, it's a nice reminder that the worst of us, or the worst behaviors that come out of humans, they're so easy to focus on. And it's nice to get a chance to talk and be reminded that we can spend half an hour, 40, whatever it's going to be, talking about making people's lives better. Sometimes we lose that.
It's so true. And I feel the same way when I'm done talking to people on the podcast. I've been doing it every week for over 2 years, because it's exactly what you said. It's like a reminder that I get done and I'm so energized, because like you said, you get to talk to people about lessons learned and lives and real stuff, and inspiring things and engaging people in what matters in the world. And it's I'm like you, I'm very grateful to have this platform. I'm gonna that word luck, like, I know you're saying it because you feel probably blessed that you can do what you do, but it's not luck. So it's a little bit of luck, but it's mostly you're recommitting every day to do something important. So I think we downplay when we say, oh, I'm lucky I get to be home. No, I worked my butt off to be in the position I am right now, and as I get older, I'm like, you probably have too, in lots of ways, personally and professionally. But I think when we downplay and we say we're lucky, I've thought about this the last couple of times. I've talked to people like, I'm really lucky I get to do. I'm like, unless someone handed it to you and said, here's a platform, you don't have to do any work, you just show up and talk. It's not luck, right?
That's you sound like me, because you're right. That's such a really, really good point. Because if you work hard, it's more probable you'll have success. And the last trip I took down south was to Vegas. And someone said something to me in Vegas when I commented on luck. And he leaned over and he said, luck is probability made personal. And the whole idea that you just hit it on the head, it's not luck. It's you increase the probability of good things happening when you engage in behaviors that cause good things.
Exactly.
So luck is probability made personal. Now, what it usually does is get you burned at the tables. But in this particular case, I'm going to take that with me. So you should have said that to me before asking what's the number one thing you took away from this podcast.
Yeah.
You just became 5 minutes in my next speech, I was on with a great podcast host who pointed something out to me.
That's another thing I love. You just never know. I wrote down a couple of pages of stuff you said, but you just never know what you're going to say. And like you said, you've talked thousands of times to people, but you always say it a different way. Something comes up to you, something I said made you think of something different, et cetera, back and forth. And then you get some new insight. I love that, which is why I take the notes. And then when I release it, it's like, oh, you said this. It's like, it's awesome. It's why I do what I do. And I'm so happy to meet you. I'm so glad I reached out. And I wish I could remember too, what made me reach out, because I just get these pings of, I don't know if this happens to you, but I'll be whether sleeping, meditating, whatever. I'm like, I'm going to call this person, or I'm just going to go look up this person. And then it turns into something else. And that's what happened to me at one point last year. And I don't remember what it was. I wish I knew, but I'm glad I did.
I've been laying low for like a year and a half, 2 years as we, I do my virtual speeches, but we're rolling out a whole bunch of new stuff. And so that's so weird. That's so great that it happened though. I did the same thing on Monday. I called 4 people I hadn't talked to in months. And man, I was walking on the ceiling when I was done.
Yeah.
Like, we have good people in our lives that we can plug into. We just don't.
Yep, right.
We come up with a reason not to. Like, that hour-long conversation seems like such a burden when you're thinking about it.
Mhm.
But man, once it starts, you realize.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
folks,
I think
one
especially
step in.
now with the pandemic and everything, people are craving that connection and that just engagement way more. And people are more grateful for it than they used to be, and then more excited to even engage. Instead of before, it was like, I'm so busy, I don't know. It's like, oh, actually, I do have extra time. I can talk to you, no problem. That happened to me the other day. I'm like, can we talk for 15 minutes tomorrow? I can talk to you anytime you want tomorrow. It's like, oh, okay, I'm so glad I asked. Like, because people are realizing, number one, what's more important, and then they have a little bit more time and they have more flexibility over their lives, and they can make things happen that they didn't think they could. And it's inspiring
Your
too.
friends make you less mad most of the time. And I think all of us are just tired of being mad. Like, I'm low grade angry all the time. You're frustrated here, you're frustrated at lies they're getting told that make this worse. And so eventually you're just kind of like, I've just had this low grade frustration for too long. And what I find is that it dissipates when you talk to people who inspire you, because we get angry at this concept of people out there we disagree with. But when we get back in the room with people who we love and adore and who make us better, we are reminded that this is what most of our human interaction is, with good people. Right. And when we just think of concepts of people, they don't have personalities, they don't have souls, right? So it's easy to judge. Go in the room with your friends and be reminded that the world has good people and they're in your life. Score.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I keep myself distant from all that. I haven't for years watched the news, turn it on. Even today we have a storm in Chicago, a winter storm, and my husband usually isn't at home, and the TV was on, and it gives me this like it was just weather news, but I'm like, I don't even want to, it's almost this visceral, like, I've been away from it for so long, and now when I hear it, I'm like, I don't want it in my psyche. I don't, like, I know that it's a little probably extreme, but because it gets in, and then I can't unthink about it, or just, I don't want that energy. I want the positive stuff.
You're right. And here's my thought, right? Here's my thought to all of the airline lounges out there. Okay. You go in and they always have the news on. No, just give me a loop of puppies and kittens. All right. Or how about this? Puppies and kittens making friends. That should be on every bloody TV in every airport, because airports suck. And so let's just, I know we got to be informed, and I think that's important, but when there's so much misinformation, it's hard, and trying to become informed becomes frustrating. And so we have to keep pushing through. But I agree with what you say, is that we need to identify things in our lives that pull energy, because work-life balance, I don't like when people say work-life balance, because it gives the idea that the ideal situation is to have them even.
Right.
Instead of work-life balance, I think it's energy and energy out balance. Some things in your life give you energy, some take it away.
Right.
Sometimes it's the same thing. Like, your family can be a huge source of energy sometimes,
and
other days it can be the primary drain. So instead of being like, is my life balanced work-life? Ask yourself, is my life balanced between things that gain energy and lose energy? And for me, social media and the news right now are pulling energy, but there are days where it's the other way. So there is nothing wrong with taking stock of, and this isn't trying to be new age, this is genuinely what pisses you off versus what makes you feel good. Balance those things out in your life. And sometimes work is the best thing that I do. Sometimes work is more rewarding than even hanging out with my friends. And so that's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, I know we kind of got off topic on that one.
Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying, and energy, and I like the energy in versus energy out, and you can be informed when you choose to be. It doesn't need to be, like you said, walking into a room and now it's there. No, I don't want it now. When I sit down and I want it for 5 minutes, then I'll go get it. It's never not available. You can just, but you can choose instead of just having it surrounding you. Yeah.
And honestly, my friends, whatever you're facing in this world, there is nothing in this world that cannot be made better by a sleep and a shower. I'm not saying that it solves the problem, but there's nothing you're facing in this world that if you have a shower and a nap won't be better. So that
I
is
totally
always
agree.
available to you. And someone, God bless living where we live, there's always someone to bring you pizza if you need it.
Yeah,
And
there's
anytime
always
things
someone
are
to bring
tough,
you food. And
yeah,
you're right. You've never take a shower or go to sleep or take a nap and wake up feeling worse. You always
yeah.
feel a little bit clearer, a little bit better. You're right. So it's like,
To go
at
back to that,
least,
what advice would I give myself? I would also add this: sleep is non-negotiable.
yeah.
Like 4 hours, 3 hours of sleep a night is not being dedicated to your job. It's being like reckless with your
You're right.
abilities, right? So sleep, everybody. And for those of you who snore, God, I'm just throwing out all the advice I got here. Go see a sleep specialist. And if you need a mask, go get one, because I'll tell you, the number one transition in my productivity over 10 years of being a speaker and a businessman and an entrepreneur is not a mentor, although I've had some great ones of them. And it's not a particular business plan or a way of business. It is, I went out and I got myself the help I needed to sleep better. And I became much smarter and much more productive. The things in our lives that we put off because we don't want to take the time to go to the dentist, go to the eye doctor, get your sleeping checked out. Like I heard a comedian once say that I went to the doctor, I put on glasses and I'm like, oh, wow, I can see. How is dramatically improved sight not higher on your to-do list?
I know.
The better off you are physically, mentally, the better off your career is. And yet we work 100 hours a week on our career, destroying ourselves. Don't dedicate as a huge portion of your time to being okay, to whatever is sort of bugging you and you don't want to make that appointment, whatever it is, you put it off, go fix it. You will be better at what you do. When you don't hurt, when you sleep.
Very solid advice. I'm always,
yeah.
I feel the same way. It's like, especially if you have the resources, the money, the insurance, all these things that you've been paying for along the way that you're kind of ignoring that you have. And then you don't go get yourself the glasses or whatever it is you need to see better, to feel better, whatever. It's like, it's all out there. There's everything's at your fingertips. Like, why aren't you? Because like you said, if you're focused on all these other things and you're really not being the best you can be, if you don't have those foundational things going for you. So I learned so much from you today. I'm really glad we chatted, and I have a ton of notes. I can't wait to share this podcast with everyone. And so people want to, are you doing virtual workshops now? Are you traveling at all if they want to get a hold of you? And what's the name of your book?
Oh, the name of my book is This is Day One, A Practical Guide to Leadership That Matters. You can get that on Amazon. And honestly, like I traveled a little bit in the fall and then Omicron put us home. I've done almost all virtual. And yeah, we're doing some, as a matter of fact, if you check out drewdudley.com and you get on the mailing list, we're doing an entire week in March of 5 brand new keynotes that dive into each of the individual values. So we're doing one on impact and empowerment. We're doing one on courage, on self-respect, on class. So go drewdudley.com, sign up for the mailing list, and you can maybe get access to some of those. We have a limited amount of people who are going to be have access, but that'll sort of give you an idea of what the new things are. And I'm at Day One Drew on pretty much all social media. That's DAYONE. And that's kind of where a lot of little clips will come up too.
Thanks, Drew. So keep doing what you're doing. If you need any more encouragement, or you once in a while you wake up, you're like, do I want to keep doing this? Keep doing it, because what you're saying matters, and your energy is great, and you're going to touch lives. You do every day, and whether you know it or not, you're doing it. And if you're loving doing it, it's how can that not be the case? So keep doing it.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity for the platform. Like it means the world to me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Take care, everyone. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. I hope you loved this episode. Don't forget to like us, subscribe, review, and share it. I hope you were truly inspired. And for a little more inspiration, don't forget to pick up my book, Peace, Possibilities, and Perspective: 8 Secrets to Serenity and Satisfaction in Your Life and Career. I can't wait to get you love in your life.